inside signatures, you need papers 8 7/8 inches by 6 3/8 of an inch. This actually then folds over to create a nice size page for the book, and that's the biggest it needs to be. You can go smaller, but no bigger than that. So I've gone through all my Stamperia papers, and some I've been able to cut out from the 12 inches wide, but I've still got the depth of 6 3/8, and I don't want to lose that, so I've just folded it over. This is a smaller piece, just sits in there, but I've still got the width, and I'll still be able to catch that into the sit stitching. And then I've used some ordinary white paper to just fill in around inside each signature. So that's one signature. This is another one. See, it's a slightly smaller piece, and there's another bit inside. That bit's been punched, but I'll be able to find something to fill that. This one, I've got a nice big piece in the middle, which I've managed to score and fit this around a page. And then this piece really wasn't big enough, so I've made a small down there. And then what I might be able to do is to take one of the tags and stick that on to make a bigger page. So you see how you can start building things up from your scraps. Again, this is another one. I did have one or two 12 by 12 sheets, just a couple of them, so that's helped. This again is another small piece. I've just got 2 pages in that one. Similar again here, I've got 2 white pages in this, and then there's just the last one. You can see it's just made up of exactly the same things. So what you'll have then is, when they're all sewn together in the signature, you will get a signature that thick to go into the book. I've kept 2 pages for the cover. These are both the ones from the pack where you've got this sort of like a freebie sheet. So I'm going to use those for the covers. I've also started cutting out little bits and pieces that I've got, so some of these pieces will add in to some of the pages. Some of these big postcards just fit perfectly. You can see something like this is going to, you can sit that on there to cover, make a different cover. So there's lots of opportunities with all these little bits and pieces. There was also an envelope that I hadn't used, so I've used that, and that will just fit in to one here. It's exactly the right width, just by chance. So it's a case of having gone through all my little bits and pieces of scraps to make this book. For marking the spine, you need to cut a piece of cardstock the same length as your page and fold it in half. And then going to measure out, I've got 3 sets of 2 holes, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. So it's 1/2 inch in and 2 punch holes 1/2 inch apart. 2 inches, another 2 1/2 inch apart, another 2 inches, and these 2 1/2 inch apart, and then that should just be your last 1/2 inch spacer there. And punch your holes in there. So this will be your template. And then fold it in half. Get your mat. Make sure that everything's lined up properly. It takes a bit of time to get it all so it's done right. And then you can lay that in across your fold and can punch 1, 2, 2 there. And that's your holes ready for your stitching. And then what you end up with is all your, hopefully, all your holes in the right place for stitching. I'm not going to show you a stitching video, but I'll give you a link to the one that I use for the stitching. I only use ordinary pearlized cotton. I don't use anything waxed or anything like that, just something that's not going to break. What I should have mentioned is before you start sewing is you need to cut 2 pieces of the card to stitch on the front and the back. I cut these from Sizzix cardstock, and when they get sewn into the whole signature, when you come to put it in your book, that's the bit that sticks into your cover, so that you then have the book will open at that point there. It will become obvious when you start sewing it, but you do need to have these two pieces, front and back, so that you have something to glue to your cover. Okay, so here is the finished stitched book. As you can see, they've all been stitched together using the holes that were punched. That gives you a nice book that lies flat. But now we need to glue this together so it stays all together, as there's a lot of individual sheets there. So what I will do is just get everything lined up and put these clamps on. Oh, they're so stiff. And then I'll need another couple in the middle. So see, what you're doing is squeezing the whole thing together. Okay, and then I would use some sticky tacky glue and paint that on the top here, and because you squeezed it all together, that it won't seep through to the paper. And then leave that to dry, and perhaps just add a little bit of ribbon if you want a piece of ribbon in your book while it's still tacky, and then that is your inside signature complete. To make the covers, I've used my die, and try not to get the light in there. I have cut 2 of the covers and 1 of the end pieces, and I've cut them out of Sizzix mat board as I would normally do. So what you would then need to do next is to line them all up and get them ready to make the book. Now, my signatures have now dried with the ribbon on, and it's this spine here that it is now the important bit. And I found that the wider piece on the die spine is going to be work better than the smaller piece. It's just a little bit too neat. So I've gone for taking this piece off here, and that's the bit I'm using, and I'm discarding this bit at the moment. So in order to create this round effect that you can then put your signature in, like that, I have taken my front and my back, and I have glued them on a spare piece of paper in order to create that extra piece here, so that you've got the fold. Now, the way I've done that is I have taken a piece of card, just ordinary white paper, copy paper, and I've 6.5 by 3 inches, and I found the center, and then 1/4 inch either side, which means that then that sits in there, and that gets glued into that. And then in order to get the right gap between the front and the back, 1/4 inch is considered to be a reasonable amount to create the gap that you need. So I've just cut a piece of the Sizzix school board at 1/4 inch, and then I've stuck my front onto the little bit of paper that's sticking out at the side, and again my back. So now, in order to get the flap at the end, I will be doing exactly the same. I will be taking my piece of paper, I will glue that onto there, I will create the gap with my spacer, and that will get glued onto there, and then the space will come off, and then that will get glued onto there, and that will give me my template shapes for my covers. Now I'm going to create the side spines of my book, and this is an example that I had made. I've used the tape to create that lovely fold in the book. This is one I did just using a half of the book here, which is just a bit of an experiment, and I've used it's called Architape, and it's just straightforward book binding material. This one happens to be sticky, which makes it a bit more awkward to use, but you can buy it just as a linen piece, and this is going to be fitted, stuck down over the top here and over the top, and then in this gap here, that's where you create this groove here by just smoothing it out with a bone folder. And I'm going to do that on that spine and also this spine here. Now I've added the tape, this is what it looks like, and I folded over, it was just about 1/2 inch either side, folded that over. I've used my bone folder to create the groove by running a line down here and the line in the edge there on each piece. It does need a little bit of help, so I've also then used put the signature in, and I've given it a little bit more of a run through with the bone folder, and so you can see now how that will actually create that lovely fold. So now I want to add my paper. I've decided in terms of a closure, I'm going to have a magnet closure, but I'm finding these magnets are really not that great in terms of going through 2 or 3 pieces of paper. So on this side, I'm actually going to put it on the outside of the paper, but on this front here, it's actually going to go underneath. So I put that part of the magnet on first before I cover the paper. Now I've cut my paper 7.5 inches in depth, and that gives me enough to be able to overhang the other side there, and also to create a fold in here as well, and so that when it's at 1/2 inch is just enough that when that is stuck down, you'll not see the edges at all. And I cut a piece for the front and the back. The back slightly smaller. You'll just have to, it depends on how wide your tape is as to how wide your piece is. This tape, you can't really glue on it, so that's why I'm trying to cut it so that it actually sits right inside the tape. And then for this piece, for the flap here, I've done exactly the same again, and I'm going to have to mitre these this bit here and fold it over, so it might be a little bit of a clump there, but I think once you actually start sort of cutting and folding it over, I think that should be okay. And it's going to have another piece put in here as well. So I'll do that next and come back with the next stage. So here's the book now with its covers on the front. You can see they've butted up nicely to the material on the front and the back. My plans for this flap have changed a little. It just wasn't really working in terms of trying to get it to fit. So I cut a piece of the pattern cardstock using the die to just fit in there, and which worked quite well. And I've cut another piece to go inside here, which will have the magnet in. But it was what I couldn't think what to use to put here, so I've decided to put some more of the book binding material in here so that I've actually got that flexibility for it to move, and then that should sit on the top there quite nicely, and then the book will get glued into there. So you can see it's all fitting in quite nicely. And so that all seems to have worked okay, and I've got my magnet closure in, and the putting that cloth and that spine worked very well. Now this is the scary bit. I need to attach my signature or signatures to the folder, and what we want is it to look straight. So just line it up as best you can, and I'll probably not talk through this bit. I'm using this Cosmic Shimmer glue because it's the only PVA glue that I know that sticks to this bookbinding fabric, or say that I know that I have. And then I'm going to shut this down. Make sure I'm straight and put pressure on it. And you can see I'm not going to open it properly because I do want it to adhere. And we do the same at the other side. Carefully unfold it and add the glue. Should really have a piece of paper stuck under here, but I'm not on my messy side of the desk, I'm actually on the clean side of the desk. Try and get to the edges and fold it over carefully. Now is that looking? That's looking okay. And press the whole thing down. Maybe put a bit of pressure on it, especially at this side here by the spine, to get it to stick down. That's closing nicely. So I don't really want to open this up at this moment, but I just want you to see that you might have to use your bone folder inside just to, I don't know whether you can see what I'm doing there, just to pull around the edges. Use it gently. And now I'm going to leave that for a little while so that it glues properly. I'm sorry I had to stop the video. My head got in the way, unfortunately, so I'm just going to show you what I was actually doing now that everything has dried. I was actually getting my bone folder in just at this point here to try and get everything glued down really, really tightly, and again at the back, just in there, so using the bone folder to really get into that crease. I mean, you can do it with your fingers, but the bone folder helps. So now everything is glued together and it's looking quite neat. And but what I do find is that you sometimes get a little bit of a gap here. So I've got one last piece of cardstock left, so I'm just going to make a little folder there, and just glue that in over the top, and that will give me another small pocket. Everything else is really looking nicely together, and the book opens flat for writing or working with, and there's a couple of pockets here, there. I've got my ribbon, some nice pages to write on, and pages that were too big, blocked out. So the whole book, I think, has come out really, really well using this lovely journal of Eileen's. I've done the same at the back just to create that little pocket here, and there it is. And from the scraps, I've made this tiny little book in exactly the same way. There were some paper pieces left over from the end of the sheet where I cut the pages for the big journal, and I've just sewn them together in exactly the same way and made the covers exactly the same. I've used a smaller width piece of the backing paper here, but it really has turned out quite nice, and it's quite a cute little addition to the set. So thank you very much for joining me, and I hope that gives you some ideas of how you could actually use this die in a different way, still creating a junk journal, but a bound journal instead.